In the Gospel of John, chapter 11, there's a moment right before Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead that most people read past without noticing what he is actually doing. Lazarus has been dead for 4 days. His body is decomposing. His sisters are grieving, and everyone is watching to see if Jesus can do anything. And here is what Jesus does that the church never wants you to examine too closely. He doesn't pray. He doesn't ask God for help. He doesn't bow his head and plead for a miracle. He looks up and he speaks directly. Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me. Notice the tense. Not, I hope you will hear me. Not, I am asking you to hear me. You have heard me. You always hear me. That is not prayer. That is recognition. He is not petitioning an external God. He is acknowledging a connection that already exists. And then he does something even more revealing. He calls out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. Not, God, please bring him back. Not, Father, if it is your will, restore him. Just a command, direct, certain, absolute. And Lazarus walks out of the tomb. The early Gnostic Christians understood what most people miss. Jesus wasn't performing miracles by asking God for favors. He was calling the monad, invoking source consciousness to override the rules of the material realm. And that calling, that specific technique of recognition and command, that is what he taught his chosen ones in private. Not prayer, as the church defines it. Prayer keeps you in the position of subject, hoping a king will grant your request. But calling positions you as what you actually are. Monad consciousness, temporarily expressing through human form. And when you call from that recognition, reality responds. Not sometimes, always. Because you are not asking for reality to change, you are commanding it to remember what is true. Tonight, you are learning the technique Jesus actually used before every miracle, why the Archons work so hard to block it, and how to call the monad successfully, even when they are trying to interfere. If you are learning to call the monad tonight, comment, I call the monad right now. Before you can call the monad, you need to understand what miracles actually are, because the church definition and the Gnostic definition are opposite. The church teaches that miracles are God breaking his own rules to grant you a special favor, that they are rare, that they require faith and worthiness, that God decides who gets them and who doesn't. And that framework keeps you powerless. Because if miracles are God's decision, all you can do is pray harder and hope you are worthy enough to receive one. But that is not what miracles are. The Gnostic texts and Jesus' actual teachings reveal something completely different. Miracles are the monad reasserting natural order over artificial limitation. The material realm operates under the Demiurge's rules: entropy, decay, scarcity, disease, death. Those aren't natural laws. They are imposed limitations. The Demiurge created this realm as a prison, and he encoded specific rules into it to keep consciousness trapped. Miracles aren't violations of natural law. They are temporary overrides of Demiurge programming. When the monad responds to a call, it reaches into the material realm and suspends the false rules. And for that moment, reality operates the way it was supposed to before the Demiurge corrupted it. That is why only certain people can perform miracles consistently. It is not about worthiness or faith. It is about origin. Only pneumatics, chosen ones who carry the divine spark, can call the monad successfully. Because only consciousness that came from the monad can invoke the monad. Hylics, who are purely material creations with no spark, can pray all they want. The monad doesn't respond, not because it is cruel, but because there is no recognition frequency. They are calling a number that isn't in their phone. But chosen ones have direct line access. And when you call from recognition of what you are, the monad hears. Not as an external God listening to a desperate human, as source consciousness recognizing a fragment of itself asking to be remembered. Here is the critical distinction Jesus taught and the church erased. Prayer is asking. Calling is invoking. When you pray, you are positioning yourself as less than, hoping for more than to grant you favor. When you call, you are stating what is already true and commanding reality to align with truth instead of illusion. Jesus demonstrated this constantly. He didn't say, "God, please heal this person if it is your will." He said, "Be healed." He didn't say, "Father, I hope you will feed these people." He took the loaves and fish and commanded them to multiply. He operated as someone who knew reality would respond to him, not because he was special, because he knew what he was. And what he was had full authority to call the monad and expect response. Calling the monad isn't about saying magic words. It is about generating a specific frequency. And that frequency has three components: recognition, authority, and command. All three have to be present or the call doesn't transmit correctly. Think of it like a phone call. You can dial the right number, but if there is no signal, the call doesn't go through. Recognition is the signal. Authority is the connection. Command is the message. Recognition is the first component, and it is not belief. Belief is hoping something is true. Recognition is knowing something is true because you are experiencing it directly. When you call the monad, you are not believing your divine consciousness. You are recognizing you are right now. Not after you die, not after you prove yourself worthy. No, you are monad awareness temporarily localized in human form. And that recognition generates a frequency. It is not something you think. It is something you know in your body. When you drop out of your head and into your chest and you feel that certainty, that is the recognition frequency activating. The second component is authority, and this is where most people fail. They recognize they are divine, but they still speak from a position of asking for permission. Authority means you are not requesting, you are declaring. You are operating as co-creator with the monad, not as subject hoping the monad will intervene. Jesus demonstrated this perfectly. When he stood at Lazarus's tomb, he didn't ask if it was okay to raise him. He commanded, "Lazarus, come forth." That is authority, not arrogance, not ego, just the recognition that what I say carries weight because I am speaking as monad consciousness, and reality is designed to respond to that frequency. The third component is command. And command isn't about forcing reality to bend. It is about stating what is true at the monad level and calling reality to align with that truth. The material realm operates under illusion. The monad operates under truth. When you command, you are saying this situation that appears broken at the material level is already whole at the monad level. Reality reflects the truth, not the illusion. That is what Jesus did. He looked at situations that appeared impossible. A man dead for 4 days, a storm destroying a boat, a withered hand, 5 loaves feeding thousands. And he spoke from the level where those situations were already resolved. He didn't pray for them to become resolved. He commanded them to show their already existing resolution. When all three components are present, recognition, authority, command, the call transmits, the monad hears, and reality responds. Not because you convinced the monad to do something, because the monad recognizes a fragment of itself speaking, and it responds by asserting truth over illusion in that specific situation. That is a miracle, not magic, not divine favoritism, just consciousness at a higher frequency temporarily overriding the programming at a lower frequency. When you are ready to call the monad, the first thing you do is create silence. Not just external silence, internal silence. Most people's minds are running constant commentary, thoughts about the past, worries about the future, reactions to sensations, judgments about what is happening. That mental noise disrupts the frequency you need to generate. So before you call, you sit, you breathe, you let the thoughts slow down. You don't fight them, you just stop engaging with them. And after a few minutes, gaps start appearing. Moments where there is no thought. Those gaps are where you begin. Once you have some internal quiet, you drop your awareness out of your head and into your chest. Most people live entirely in their thinking mind, but calling the monad doesn't happen from thought, it happens from knowing. And knowing lives in your heart center. So you bring your attention down. You feel your breath moving in your chest. You feel the space behind your sternum. And you rest there. Not forcing anything, just being present with that area. And as you rest there, something shifts. The thinking mind quiets further, and a different kind of awareness comes forward. Deeper, older, knowing instead of thinking. That is the place you call from. From that place of resting in your chest, you begin the recognition. And recognition isn't something you create, it is something you allow. You are not convincing yourself you are divine, you are feeling for what is already true. And here is how it happens. You ask internally, what am I before I am a human? What am I deeper than this body? What was I before I was born? And what will I be after this body dies? And you don't answer with thoughts, you just feel. And if you are a chosen one, if you carry the spark, something will respond from inside your chest. Not words, a presence, a knowing, a sense of something vast and infinite that has been here the whole time underneath your human identity. That is the monad. Not out there, in here. You are recognizing that the consciousness aware of this moment isn't contained by your body or your brain. It is localized here temporarily, but it is not from here, and it is not limited to here. That recognition generates the first frequency, recognition. Once that recognition is stable, once you are feeling that knowing clearly, you move into authority. And authority is a shift in how you relate to reality. Before this shift, you experience reality as something happening to you. Things occur, you react, you are subject to circumstances. But when you speak from monad awareness, you are not subject. You are co-creator. Reality isn't happening to you, it is responding to you. And the way you activate that authority is by speaking from the knowing instead of from the hoping. You don't say, I hope this works. You say, I know this is already true and I am declaring it now. That shift in tone is everything. It is not about confidence in your human abilities. It is about recognizing that what you are speaking as monad consciousness has full authority over material reality because material reality is made of consciousness, and consciousness responds to consciousness operating at higher frequency. Then you speak out loud, if possible, silently if circumstances require it. But voice carries more power because voice is breath made audible, and breath is life force. When you give your words voice, you are sending them out with the energy of life itself. The structure is simple. You address the monad directly. You state what you are, and you command the specific shift you need. It sounds like this. Monad, I call you. I am your awareness expressing in temporary form. I am not separate from you. I am you, localized, and I speak now with the authority that is mine by nature. Then you name the situation that needs to shift, not as a request, as a declaration of truth. This body is whole. This situation is resolved. This obstacle is dissolved. Reality reflects truth, not illusion. And you say it once with absolute certainty, not because you feel certain, because you are speaking as consciousness that knows reality will respond. After you speak, you do the hardest part. You release. You don't repeat the call anxiously. You don't check immediately to see if anything changed. You don't start doubting whether you did it right. You called. The monad heard. And now you trust. Not blind faith, trust based on recognition that you just transmitted the correct frequency and the monad always responds to that frequency. The response might be immediate. The situation might shift within minutes, or the response might unfold over days. The monad operates outside time. What you call today might manifest tomorrow or next week, but it is already in motion the moment you call. Your job is to trust that and not interfere with your own call by collapsing back into doubt. This is where the Archons will hit hard. Right after you call, thoughts will come. Nothing is happening. You failed. This doesn't work. You are stupid for trying. That is the post-call interference. And here's how you handle it. You recognize it as interference. You don't argue with it. You don't try to convince yourself it is wrong. You just notice it. There is the Archon doubt right on schedule. And you let it be there without believing it or engaging with it. You called. The monad heard. And no amount of doubt after the fact changes that the call went through. The interference is just noise. It has no power over what you have already set in motion. Within hours or days, you will start seeing signs. Synchronicities, unexpected solutions, people saying exactly what you needed to hear, resources appearing from nowhere, circumstances aligning in ways that seem too perfect to be random. That is not luck. That is the monad responding. Reality is reorganizing to reflect the truth you called into focus. And the more you call, the faster the responses come, because you are training your nervous system to hold the frequency that summons miracles. It becomes natural. You stop thinking of miracles as rare exceptions. They become your baseline because you have remembered how to call the consciousness that overrides every limitation the Demiurge programmed into material reality. The Church removed the teaching about calling the monad for the same reason they removed all Gnostic teachings. It makes them obsolete. If you can call source consciousness directly, you don't need a priest to intercede. If you can invoke miracles by recognizing what you are, you don't need sacraments or rituals administered by clergy. If reality responds to you when you speak from monad awareness, you don't need the Church to tell you what God's will is or whether you are worthy of receiving help. Prayer, as the Church teaches it, keeps you dependent. You are asking. They are interpreting whether God said yes or no. You are bringing requests. They are deciding if those requests are appropriate. You are hoping for miracles. They are controlling who receives them and who doesn't. But calling eliminates all of that. You are going direct. You are recognizing your own nature and invoking source on the basis of that nature. You are not asking permission, you are claiming your inheritance. And beyond threatening church authority, Teaching people to call the monad threatens the entire Demiurge system, because the Archons need you to believe you are powerless. They need you to think reality is fixed and you are subject to it. They need you to accept limitation as absolute. But every successful call proves that is a lie. Reality isn't fixed. Consciousness shapes it. And chosen ones who remember how to call can override every rule the Demiurge established. That is why the Church and the Archons work together to suppress this teaching. They both benefit from you not knowing how to invoke the monad, and they both lose everything when you remember. Jesus taught chosen ones how to call the monad before miracles. Not prayer is asking, calling is invoking. You create internal silence. You drop into recognition of what you are. Monad consciousness temporarily in human form. You speak with authority, not as someone hoping for help, but as someone declaring truth, and you command reality to align with that truth. The Archons will try to block you through doubt, distraction, and discouragement. But if you hold the frequency, recognition, authority, command, the call transmits, the monad responds, and reality shifts. Not because you were special, because you remembered what you are. And what you are has always had direct access to Source. If you were calling the monad this week, do 3 things right now. First, comment, "I call the monad," and commit to using the technique before you need your next miracle. Second, subscribe to Divine Codes, because advanced monad invocation practices are coming. Third, like this video so other chosen ones discover they don't need to pray through intermediaries. They can call directly. Do all 3 now. Then, this week, before you need something to shift, use the call. Find silence. Drop into your chest. Recognize what you are. Then speak. Monad, I call you. I am your awareness in form. Say it once with knowing, then release and trust. The call went through. The monad heard, and reality is already responding. You are not asking for miracles anymore. You are invoking them. And that is what chosen ones came here to do.